Hello, the name is Azrael Dream. Well, apparently I can't just stay in my room 24/7 because apparently, according to pə-PY-rəs, I need to pay my bill even though this is my house they live in. For the last time, we pay our rent. And second of all, because you didn't take care of the garden, Frisk almost died. And I think my YouTube channel will grow. 1,000 up to 10,000 views are nothing compared to other people. You should know that. Anyways, because I don't want these assholes out of my house, I need to make this video. So here we go. First of all, let me make something clear at the beginning. I know that Apple Studio made this game as a teaser, and for a teaser, this game is alright. I mean, the game looks great, the conversation makes you interesting to wait for the full game, or Pursuit, the comic, so that you can find out what happens next and how everything came to be. I am not here to trash Apple Studio as a person, nor am I here to trash her works. What I want to do in this upcoming video is giving developer who wants to make a good Horrortale game some tips on how to do it, and nothing more with the story of the game. The Horrortale game is about you, the player, controlling the action of a newly found human called Eliza to escape the underground after the 8 human finished a neutral run and left underground with no king and many unsolved problems. And since that visit, everything went south. When you start out the game, you get greeted by a rather odd-looking Flowey. He lost one eye, and which tells the player that many years have passed since the fall of the 8 human, and a lot of things have gotten south, that even a trip to Snowden could cost your life. And our job is now to help the new human Eliza going from the entrance of the ruin to Snowden. On our way to Snowden, we meet many characters, an overprotected tutorial that acts psychotic to get the player's forgiveness, as well as guilt-tripping us, the player, to forgive other monsters and give these monsters a second chance. Then we have a Sans so sadistic he generated a whole trend for decapitated limb jokes. I mean, the head dog doesn't cook itself, am I right? And then we have pə-PY-rəs. pə-PY-rəs, who is so perverted in his want for human to play his puzzles that he turned the human who dies to his puzzle into a special pasta, which turns out to be the favorite fruit in the underground. Your job as a player is to choose from different dialogue options a way to please both a goat mom and the 2 sadistic skeleton brothers so that you can enter Snowden. But this will not happen because of the fact that when you accept pə-PY-rəs' challenge of doing this puzzle that he prepared for you, the teaser will end, which is one of the biggest flaws of this teaser game, which is being way too short, meaning you could, if you wanted to play this game, beat it in only 1 minute by only talking to pə-PY-rəs. But if you want to play this game 100%, you only need to play this game for 13 minutes, because the only gameplay aspect is the dialogue option. But more on that later. Speaking of pə-PY-rəs, why don't we take a look at the characters that are being presented in this teaser game, because they are the main reason of why this AU became so popular, beside the art style, which also will be discussed later. So let's begin. First of all, let me make something clear. This teaser was posted before the actual first appearance of Sans and pə-PY-rəs, meaning that some characteristic like Sans' rather sadistic nature is also added up with a thirst for human flesh, which isn't present in the Horrortale comic. He's rather a sadistic jerk and also manipulator, and also the main reason why everything went to hell. But besides Sans, because Sans is not always the highlight of every alternate universe, you meet many other characters, like Eliza, the heroine that you control, Flowey, the one-eyed flower, which apparently wants to help you on this horrific journey. Then we got Sans, the sadistic butcher, pə-PY-rəs, the cook from hell, and Toriel, the horror helicopter mother. All of these characters were already introduced to the well-known original work of Toby Fox, but all of these characters have changed from all the witness horror, even though it's never really stated in this teaser what happened to the underground of why no food is available and why everyone is acting so sadistic and bloodthirsty. We see the lasting damages. For example, pə-PY-rəs was in the original Undertale lovable goon who did puzzles to not only entertain the human before he was captured, but also to showcase how great he is. He also cooked for the human special spaghetti to help the human to get motivated to do the next puzzle. But in Horrortale, his love of puzzle becomes perverted because
because of the constant feeling of hunger. So he uses his puzzle as a test to see if the human can survive. If this human can survive his simple puzzles, their corpses will turn into his special pasta. Sans was in the original game a carefree guy who was rather lazy, but would follow you around on your journey and would help you by giving you, the player, some advice as well as some sweet, delicious cat dogs to motivate you on your journey. But in Horrortale, this version of Sans is a sadistic jerk who doesn't care about anything. In fact, he is done with everything. He doesn't really care about his brother. He's rather done with the constant build-up and constant check of the puzzles. He's also done with all the humans that come to the underground and want to ask how all of this happens. He only wants to go back to sleep or finish his job. So he just wants pə-PY-rəs to already kill this human and stop with these annoying puzzles. I mean, when he gets the opportunity, he full-heartedly kills the human immediately. Like when you walk by him or accept the offer for a hot dog, or when you mentioned Gaster. All of this results into your death and into his delight because his job is done and he can go back to sleep. Flowey becomes the tutorial guide for the player because whenever the player dies, he gives the player some tips on how to avoid it. And before you ask, the tips are not don't die, noob, lol, but rather tips like don't get any closer, or I want you to not get closer, or it's rude to play with people's emotions. These are the only interaction you get from Flowey, and it's rather interesting to see a good version of Flowey, or rather a Flowey who is willing to help the human that falls underground. Sure, there will come some questions of why Flowey does things for you. Is it just a sick game for this flower? Or has Flowey changed because of the witness horror? Has he developed sympathy, something that his original counterpart didn't have? These questions won't be answered in this teaser game and makes people interested into reading the comic, which is a huge plus for the author. All of these characters are interesting to look at as well as to read about, because all of these characters who were likable in the original game turned into bloodthirsty monsters that are completely unredeemable because of the sins they committed. But here's a tip for all the upcoming game designers. Horror is not just there to scare people shitless so that you are completely scared of entering the real world because you are scared that any animatronics could turn into a bloodthirsty monster like in Five Nights at Freddy. I mean, sure, this version of horror is also popular, but another version of horror is the feeling that you feel safer in the real world because you know your world could always be worse. And this is the reason why Horrortale worked perfectly. It showed the most twisted version of Sans and pə-PY-rəs, as well as all the other characters. All of these characters act in some ways like their original self, like pə-PY-rəs' love for pasta and Sans' rather lazyful nature, as well as Toriel's love for children. But because of the witness horror, like I already mentioned a million times before, they became uncanny and you become completely disgusted by their action. Even though you understand why they do these actions, you still are completely disgusted. Through that, you generate a feeling of unease to the players because they constantly ask themselves, couldn't that happen to our beloved characters? Couldn't my action from the original Undertale generate this twisted version of Horrortale? And if these characters are affected by this horror, then how many other characters are also affected by this horror? How many characters have changed their ways or adapted to this horror by adapting their morals, by seeing something like eating another monster or eating a human as something mundane? Or how many monsters have cracked by seeing this horror and try everything to keep to their old values and constantly wishing for the old times? This is not only extremely horrific to see, but also extremely depressing. And it makes you feel better when you see the original game, because they are in this original game all happy. So my tip for you is write these characters as monstrous as possible, but also let them keep their main character trait to make them recognizable. Also, let them keep some morals and also some bit of humanity to make you even feel worse when you meet them. And also, let their morals change over the course of the horrors. And also read the comics, because Sans and pə-PY-rəs were a bit changed in the comics. So you should probably read this comic to see Sans' lazy nature and joke making becoming rather sadistic, and also his constant guilt tripping for himself, and also his constant inner fight to keep some morals in this broken world. And that was it. I know I didn't cover Eliza and Toriel, but I did it because Toriel needs to be covered in the comic, because her appearance in the comics is more present and has more material to analyze. And Eliza will be analyzed in the art style, artistic and character design category, which I will be covering right now. After being greeted by Flowey, who looks quite sharp, you get welcomed by a harsh and bleak looking world. Quite literally is that the case, because unlike the original Undertale from Toby Fox, we aren't welcomed with colorful colors that shine as bright as a children coloring book, but instead the player is welcomed by an art style and aesthetic that is pale and gloomy looking, a setting that screams spooky forest, that screams darkness awaits you, that screams upcoming depression, that screams about a forbidden world that is plagued by poverty. With this help of color palette, this game screams right at the beginning a message to the player. This is not a happy story, but rather the start of a horror story. To make it even more gloomy, the game isn't even lighted to bring out a new look to this world. Instead, the player should and only can focus on the bleak colors, which can work, but some highlights with the help of lighting or dominant colors would actually help to emphasize how dangerous someone is. This also saw the author, because in his later comics he changed over the course some color patterns to emulate certain feeling in this comic. For example, he uses black and white color scheme to symbolizes the hopelessness and also the past. He uses white and black color scheme to emphasize how scared someone is. He uses vibrant colors to emphasize the feeling of someone and how someone is in immense pain. These colors also emphasize how sadistic and how deranged their mental states are. And those static lines. Damn. If someone wants to make a game out of this, they need to make transition through different color patterns. For example, a show like JoJo's Bizarre Adventure used different color patterns over and over again, but made it extremely natural over the course of the story by just changing the color tone, which immediately highlighted different action scenes and made it immediately more interesting. The only game that did something similar like JoJo and the comic from Horrortale is Amori, who also used different kinds of color pattern in the black space to emphasize certain emotions. So definitely take a look at Amori's black space to get some information on how to make a color transition work, as well as JoJo's Bizarre Adventure. But let's return to the topic of art. To be more specific, art style and character design. To Saw Apple Studios' pale and gloomy looking art style, he enhanced the shape language tremendously. What do I mean by that? Well, the so-called shape language is a concept used in art and animation to communicate meaning based on shapes we are familiar with. When used in characters, object and background design, shapes can tell a story, show personality and summon emotion through the help of simple shapes. So, for example, the circle communicates that the character is soft, squishy, harmless, approachable, chargeable. Characters like Winnie the Pooh or Steven from Steven Universe fit this description because their character design is based on this shape, while squares tells the story of a character who's solid, sturdy, strong, supportive, reliable, and inflexible. Garnet from Steven Universe once again fit this description because her whole body is formed like a square. But also characters like Superman convert this shape language. And even Sans from Undertale, as well as pə-PY-rəs, converts this shape language. And finally, the shape of a triangle. Focus on the aspect of the characters that are sharp, directional, dynamic, dangerous, and unpredictable. These character designs are mostly used for villainous characters, but can also be used for heroic characters. For example, Sonic the Hedgehog is based on the simple triangle shape language, as well as the Dark Knight himself. Or, because we already talked about Steven Universe, there's also Pearl, who is based on the triangle shape language. It is also important that the triangle shape can exaggerate the size and length of these shapes and can heighten fear and transform how menacing or underwhelming the character is. It is also important to state that you can use many shapes in one design to highlight, for example, their widths but also their strength. One of these main examples is Batman, who is based on a triangle but also based on a square, and showcase the sneaky but also rather intelligent looking hard-hitting, brute force vigilante. But enough simping over Batman, because this game is full of shape language. Let's take our main protagonist Eliza, aka the girl you play as, is the shape of a triangle as well as a circle. The triangle showcases Eliza's weak and rather timid body, which is so weak and timid to fight against any kind of monster that she will come across. It is also rather apparent whenever she is scared that she trembles even harder in fear than any other person because of her rather underwhelming and timid body. Her face is also a triangle, to be more specific, an upside down triangle, which highlights Eliza's quick and clever thinking that she needs to show and use to survive the hellhole she is in. It can also showcase her unpredictability because she needs to take action to survive in this hellhole. To our dismay, these actions aren't as apparent as in the comics. And the squares on her shoulder, well, let's just say it only showcases her soft squishy body, which once again emphasizes her timid body. Even the tree, sign and snow showcased how dangerous they all become in this horror world. And all these colors, which are so gloomy and gray, emphasize the shape, because the gloomy and dark tone of all these colors enhance the change of the underground and how dangerous it became, how lifeless it became, and how broken it became. The trees are as sharp as a kitchen knife, the snow is as lifeless as a dead bone, and the ruins are so neglected that it reveals cracks, vines, and even claw sign. This not only displays the hopelessness of the underground, but also shows the lack of self-care, because things like food and safety are more important than keeping the stones clean. For Sands of Papyrus, their design is the same from the original, but with some really noticeable changes. Papyrus' design was always based on the circle and squares. I mean, it fits his personality. He is silly and rather naive looking skeleton who is always there to support you. But besides his cheerful nature, there was also a bit of pride and ego, which was always showcased by his boots and scarf. His scarf is a triangle shape and showcases his dynamic and unpredictability towards the player, while his boots were square forms, showcasing his strength and staying true in what he believes in. But even though this is Horrortale, the author and artist didn't change this design of Papyrus. Well, they kept everything the same instead of the intensity of the color and bloody teeth. But the creator didn't change anything by not giving him a new outfit like any other AU creator would do. Instead, he kept it the way it is, and also kept the same personality of a happy and optimistic guy. But now his optimistic and hopeful demeanor became rather perverted, due to the fact that his optimistic demeanor is focused on killing the human to make sure he can make a new creation for his newest pasta, which is highlighted by the bloody sharpening triangle teeth, which showcases that he is dangerous and is unpredictable. Lust for blood is still something you need to fear. So for all the upcoming game designers, please try to imitate this art style of Soar Apple Studio, or at the very least use gloomy colors to give the player a feeling of something not belonging there, because all the characters you face in the original Undertale were full of vibrant colors, and there still are, but giving these characters some gloomy and darker colors and other shapes, you make sure that the player feels like something is out of place. And also use a lot of lighting and also bloomy some parts. But enough character designs and this brilliant art style. Let's return to the game itself by focusing on the gameplay. Most of the time when we play an Undertale fan game, they are based on the RPG genre and focus on the mechanic of the turn-based combat that we saw in the original Undertale game, where you need to dodge the different types of attack and retaliate with your own types of attack, or you retaliate by showing kindness by simping for the enemy. This works for most Undertale fan games due to the fact that you take the role of an all-powerful demon child who can kill everyone with one knife slice. The only real challenge in these games is to stay alive and dodge the powerful attacks of your enemies in front of you. But for a game like Horrortale, it wouldn't work because, as we already discussed, Eliza is weak and fragile as glass. You could say she is Mrs. Glass. The only things that misses is Bruce Willis as the Unbreakable. But let's return to the topic at hand. You see, roleplay gameplay focus on the aspect of controlling someone else, someone powerful who can cast spells or use guns or raid tombs. Role-playing games are mostly used to escape the dull and uninteresting reality we live in, to live someone else's life. But horror games can't have any of that. Horror games are focused on the feeling of helplessness. If you as the player find a knife or a gun to shoot all the enemies, you lose the this feeling of hopelessness. This was the problem by games like Dead Space 2 and Dead Space 3. The first game was a horror science fiction game, while the other two games were action-packed games. So, how can we make sure we feel as vulnerable as a baby that was just born? Well, we could always use the first-person perspective, but this would take a lot of time and effort, and also would lose the original art style of this game. So Apple Studio had another idea. Why not try a point-and-click adventure game, which has its upside. A point-and-click adventure game explores a game world primarily with the mouse instead of graphically complex action scene. There are usually puzzles to be solved and a background story to be discovered by collecting diary entries or so. Well, Horrortale did the explorer aspect, but even the exploration in this game is rather underwhelming. You see, in this game there are 4 areas to explore. 5 if you take the starting area into account. But in all of these areas, only 3 are areas you can explore. And when you do, the only thing you can do is talking to different characters, like Sans, Toriel, and pə-PY-rəs. And if you say the wrong thing, then be ready to be a head smaller or entering Pornhub because you are smoking hot. Don't get me wrong, the conversation with Sans are alright. I mean, the characters are acting quite sadistic and give you an information dump on what happened after the 8 human fell down. But info dumps aren't enough when that's the only interaction you get. Which is why I like the interaction you have with Toriel. You see, you have 2 choices when you stand before the ruin door: teasing and talk. By teasing, you get a silly and childish animation, which makes you laugh for a moment. But your laugh doesn't hold long because Toriel starts to cry afterwards. By talking, Eliza speaks her when you pick the option talk, Eliza speaks her heart out and apologizes to Toriel that you as the player left her, but you need to do this because you want to go home. To my dismay, this was the only real dialogue option you can have in this game. You can't choose what exactly Eliza is saying. You can't start teasing Toriel doing your heartfelt apology. You also can't ask for food or weapons to protect yourself. And you can't make a charisma, intelligent, rationality, good girl or bad girl speech check like games like Fallout did, or Mass Effect with its karma system, which allows you, when you are more Paragon, to choose the Paragon option, and when you're more Renegade, choose the Renegade option. Horrortale could have something similar. For example, for all the upcoming actions you take, like let's say for example, you tease Toriel, you get a bad girl or savage point. These savage points are collected over the course of the game. If you have enough savage points, you can choose different options, like you take the axe, or you take the knife, or you can threaten certain people. By doing that, you make the choices your player take meaningful, and they feel like they accomplished something. They did something no other player did, and I feel like their choices mattered in the end, as well as makes them curious on how to play the game differently. Like, what if we only choose the nice option, the rational and good girl traits? How would Eliza, when she's completely innocent, react to certain situation? You could even include different dialogues option for a savage Eliza or a good innocent Eliza. This was also introduced in the comics. When pə-PY-rəs offers the player, or in this case the reader, some spaghetti, you have the option to decline or accept the spaghetti. Because most of the readers choose the option of accepting the spaghetti, the comic was adjusted for this occasion, and Eliza ate the special spaghetti which was made out of human. And from there out, she didn't have a huge problem eating human flesh. But to my dismay, in this teaser, this wasn't possible. When you talk to Toriel, the only real choice you can make is agreeing with every single request she made. Because if you don't, well, you get burnt to a crisp, and that's game over. Because Eliza needs to stay the hopeful girl who believes that the monsters still can change and are not as bad, even though we saw what happened if you don't please a single monster or just walk by it. Meaning that, like the choices in a Life is Strange game and a Telltale game, your actions don't have consequences, and in the end you only get 1 or 2 endings. So, if you want to make a Horrortale fan games, follow the path of the comics by including choices that will change Eliza for the long run. This will make sure that the players feel like as if their choices have meaning. Introduce also different kinds of points, like good girl, bad girl, points that will allow you as the player to access other choices, and in the end, other endings. Besides choices, a typical point-and-click adventure has the ability to interact with your surroundings. You can collect items that you can later use to interact with people, which could trigger an event that sparks the plot or even open up a new storyline. Or they are just funny. Some point-and-click adventures have so-called collectibles that are important for a quest or are lore relevant, like a diary entry from a guy who came before you. But in this teaser game, you can't collect any items. I mean, pə-PY-rəs got a lot of puzzle, but you can never solve a puzzle in this demo. And even if we did, it would have been a dialogue option, because over the time in this teaser, we couldn't collect any items that we could combine to solve the upcoming puzzle. What is also pretty unpoggers is the fact that you can't click on the trees, on the people and other objects to get insight of what Eliza thinks about these things. Sure, it doesn't sound like a huge loss, but through that we aren't getting any insight in the character we are controlling. Meaning that the only real characterization in this game is through the walk animation, the lack of backtalk towards Sans, and the whole conversation with Toriel, which is literally just say the right thing Eliza at the beginning of the story would say, meaning we need to ignore all the trauma she most likely has experienced, and if you don't do it, you will die and must start again, which in my case is a huge loss. So, because there aren't any puzzle you need to solve or items you need to collect or a different option for different paths, you just need to talk to people, meaning that the difficulty is non-existing, which also means that you won't be feeling as if you accomplished something when you're done playing this game. I mean, if you really want to, you could play this game in 1 minute by just talking to pə-PY-rəs, making this game not worth playing for a second time, because there isn't an action that will allow you to go around pə-PY-rəs or even kill pə-PY-rəs, which would result into different endings you as a player could explore. But how can we make it better? Well, let's take the game Edna Breaks Out for example. In this game, you're controlling a girl who is trapped in a mental asylum. The reason of why she is there is not known, but what she knows is that she wants to break out. But she's rather weak. She can't just go out there and kill the guard, grab the key and his gun to escape the asylum. So, to escape the cell, she is now forced to think outside the box. So, she uses everything at her disposal. She talks to the guard, she talks to a stuffed animal, Harvey, and she breaks a table and uses the leg of the table to cut a hole into the wall to find a ventilation shaft, which she breaks up to escape from her cell. By just escaping this one cell, she did so many action and found out more about every single character than Eliza did in the whole game. Sure, Edna Breaks Out isn't perfect. For example, Edna doesn't change and her action and the solving of problems is always the same, which results at the end the option for 2 endings and nothing more. But I must be honest, this is the only point-and-click adventure I know. But at least you could explore the asylum and got to find information about how this asylum was built and why you are here. This could even get you some new dialogue option or items, which makes you feel like your action and wish to understand the world is being rewarded. The only thing that Horrortale does is Eliza walks from right to left, talks to Sans and asks him questions she couldn't know because we, the player, only knew these kinds of questions to ask for Sans. And getting assaulted by Sans. And we don't do anything about it, because if we talk back, we instantly die. Meaning that this game only claims to be a point-and-click adventure, but is mostly a visual novel where the choices don't have a less impact. But this is because it is a teaser, so I let it pass. But for all the upcoming developers, make sure that the player feels accomplished by giving him puzzle to solve. Make sure that the player wants to visit the game again by giving the player different options, which results into different stories, different dialogues, different characterization of Eliza, and in the end results into different endings, like in the original comics. Man, that was a long rant. Let's get back to something I really enjoy. So let's talk about the music.
Hey, it's me, Teach Tell from the future, and I forgot something to mention. The dog interaction. The dog interaction is the only interaction where Eliza can interact with a person. She can pet the dog, or even snake the dog's neck. Eliza even has her own dialogue about the dog. To make a good game, make more things like these. Also follow my advice about the good and bad goal points. As well as the fact that Chloe become Eliza's companion in the game. Let Chloe follow Eliza 24/7 and also make his own comments, like Harvey from Edna Breaks Out.
The art style, the music Soar Apple Studio composed for this game describes Horrortale perfectly. Why is that, you may ask? Well, let's just start with the mood all of these songs give you. And as you may have realized, I used some Horrortale original tracks in this video. And all of these original tracks gave a feeling of unease, a feeling as if someone is right behind you, a feeling as if the world around you is losing all hope. Or to keep it short, you can quite easily get intimidated by everything you see. This is brilliant, showcased by the original track Questionary, or how I like to call it, Question for Sans. This song plays when you talk to Sans, and is unlike every other track. It is louder than the other tracks, which, while the pitch is lower and some beat parts are being drawn longer to keep you at bay, to give you the feeling that you are not in control, but Sans is. While the track Starving, that we as the player are experiencing for the longest, due to the fact that this is the overworld track, is the complete opposite, even though it has some elements of the song in it. Because unlike Questionary, Starving gives, with its low volume, the slow tempo and almost non-existent beat except the howling wind, a feeling of distress without the feeling of control, because you are not in Kansas anymore. This feeling of helplessness is amplified when you hear just the wind howl and hear in the background how the beat mimics Sans' music track or even Sans' finger movements, as if he is waiting for you. But what is a game without sound effects? I mean, sound effects give the game we play the extra push, giving a game a personality. I mean, what would be Star Wars without its music and lightsaber sound effect? And like with the music, this teaser delivers by giving walking through the snow sound effect, which emulates the feeling as if you're walking through 3 feet deep snow. Sans' finger movement really sounds like he is hitting the wood with his finger. Eliza's cry of agony, as well as she is being burned to a crisp, are bone chilling, as well as rather disturbing. The cutting of one's head is fast but brutal, because Sans' sadistic amusement is rather disturbing. And even the original talking sound effects are present in this game, with the only difference that pə-PY-rəs talking sound effect is deeper than its original sound effect. But it still stays true with his darker, yet still existing, innocent personality like in the original game. So, we are almost done, but one thing is missing, and that's the animation in this game. And before you ask, the characters are being covered in the upcoming video, so please wait for it. Even though there aren't any major animation, there are still enough to give every character a bit more character. For example, Eliza's slender walk, the lower look when she walks, showcasing her timid and also scared nature. It also shows Eliza's low confidence and her fear of what she will be facing in this world. Eliza also got for every death she faces an animation, where every time she dies, she cries in agony and also looks like she is really in pain, like the burning animation, or when Sans is about to cut her head open with an axe. But beside Eliza, there's also pə-PY-rəs. pə-PY-rəs is a giant in this game, meaning he needs to crouch down to the player, which gives a feeling of unease. When pə-PY-rəs is so tall, a question comes to mind. How tall can the other monster be? It also didn't help that his giant bloody teeth were moving when he was talking, because that shit is diabolical creepy. And his small animation for his different moods, like being excited after you stated that you like his pasta, and his complex face when you state that you find this pasta unpoggers. And like his brother, Sans delivers this as well, because unlike his OG counterpart in this version, Sans can move his mouth, so he can showcase his sadistic nature by smiling at your suffering. And also his dark eyes, which are a must if you want to make the scene even more intense. And his animation of summoning his bones are simple yet impressive. So, if you want to make a fan game of Horrortale, make sure to focus on animation for every mood, mimic, action and death, so that you can have variation in this game and make it. This took longer than I expected. Even though it was just a simple yet intriguing teaser, it really got some good and some underdeveloped parts. But still, we can't ignore the legacy that Horrortale left behind, because it showcases us that not every Undertale game needs to be an RPG to convert its message. Sometimes it is better to tell your story in a different media format to convert it better, which is why the point-and-click gameplay definitely works for Horrortale, because it highlights Eliza's weak and state, timid nature, and her inability to simply face her problems head on because she needs to think outside the box to actually solve her problems because the monsters are way too strong. The art style was also a great way of showing us the horror in this world. The bleak colors and the shapes makes it different from the other game art style, where they just want to mimic Toby Fox art style. It also takes liberty to be something different, and it bloody works. Heck, I would even go so far and say that it is better than most art style I ever seen. But that was it for today. I hope you enjoyed this extremely long video, and I hope I see you in the next video.